Looks like we have people coming in. Welcome to the webinar. Modern Commerce Blueprint from Transactional to Transformational. My name is Rick Watson. I'm CEO and founder of RMW Commerce. And today's discussion is actually built on a white paper that we did with the help of Pipe17 and Shopify. And many of the folks that are on this call today contributed to the discussion. If you're looking for how to download that, we actually have a QR code you can download here. If you haven't got it yet, feel free to take a picture of it. I'll leave that up for a little bit and put it later on in the call. But in the research, we found a couple of things that forward-thinking brands can cut their commerce costs, meaning like the cost to serve, by up to 80% compared to legacy OMS, launch new channels in days rather than months, which is a huge upside, empower operators, not just developers, to manage workflows with AI, and definitely check out the white paper if you haven't seen it yet. In order to kind of help bring that blueprint to life, I'm joined by a couple of leaders who've experienced this transformation firsthand. First, we have Dan Yawitz, the head of technology at Aterian, Anthony Hockaday, from the senior director of product management at Radial, and Ben Noonan, who we all know and love as the CEO of RunDTC. So definitely thank everyone for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. So I think we can get going, and maybe we can start out with Anthony a little bit. In our prep call, when we were talking about this, you mentioned avoiding sort of like a multi-million-dollar drag in legacy development and infrastructure overhead. Radial had been using an OMS in the past, and did I miss something? Like, walk us through how you get from like so much cost and then agility from how did the stack shift? What did life look like before? And what were some of the initial benefits that you kind of received?
Yeah, no, it certainly isn't a typo in there. And what you kind of described there is the challenge for us was very real. And the reason for that is that we had an order management system that we built entirely in-house, and we had that for about 20 years or so. And while that served us well for all those years, I think for us as a fulfillment company, the biggest challenge that we saw as a result of that was that onboarding a new client was a long, resource-heavy process. In some cases, it could take 2 to 4 months to onboard a client. And part of that was simply because we had to specialize, we focus on specialized technical teams. And then as a result of that, all of that energy was really spent around infrastructure cost, maintaining code, and that really limited our ability to focus on what we would consider the high value client experience things. And so as we look towards how do we improve that, we felt that we had to modernize the tech stack and actually do that out of our walls. And by doing that, what that's allowed us to do, within this past year is quickly accelerate our onboarding. We've been able to onboard clients in as little as 2 to 3 days. And we've got experience of that over the last year by onboarding about 12 clients, all within about 2 to 3 week period. And for us, as we think about what that modernizing of the tech stack has really, benefited us, if I kind of put it into 2 key aspects. For our clients, it's just faster time to value. As I talked about, faster onboarding times allows them to, get their products back online quickly, allows them to start scaling with Radials with 3PL a lot sooner. And then really from a resource allocation, because we talked at the beginning about, those millions of dollars in cost, not having the infrastructure costs, not having all the dependency focus. And then focus that, like I said, more on the things that provide value to our clients and the experiences there.
No, I think that makes sense. And you're focused on onboarding new clients to your 3PL as quickly as possible. Dan, like, you're on the other side, you're as a aggregator, owner of multiple brands. and so I think a lot of brands in the audience, and especially those that are connected to brands, you have a picture that a lot of people can relate to. Pipe17 came on, and before using Pipe17, what did adding a new channel mean to you?
Sure. So like Anthony, we also had an OMS that we built in-house. We had an engineering team, so certainly can relate to the idea of having infrastructure costs to maintain. If we wanted to add a new channel, it could be we had to account for both development time, but then also resource and time on the backlog. So even if it was a quote unquote easy channel for us to add, something that could be 4 to 6 weeks of dev time, we had limited resources. If we had to prioritize that as part of our quarterly planning, it could be as much as 12 to 16 weeks out, right? So it would take time. It also meant that our revenue team and also our warehousing and logistics team couldn't be as agile as they wanted to be about shifting the direction of the business. That could be they identify a potential $100,000 a month channel that we want to sell on, in which case every week that we're not selling there is revenue lost. Or it might be a case of we want to onboard a new 3PL that has lower parcel costs for us, but we haven't worked with their WMS before. For example, we might see that a company running with Unis might have lower parcel rates than something with Lodua. We want to shift over there, develop a better relationship, but we didn't have the capacity to connect to their system in time. So both operators saving costs and then sales teams trying to sell in new places were I won't say hamstrung, but slowed down by our in-house capacity.
Yeah. So it sounds like Pipe17 for you was that connection between sort of the channel, which is sort of Shopify, the marketplace, whatever it is, the 3PL and the WMS. Are there any other systems that you use it to connect to?
Our ERP would be our big one. So making sure that orders flow through from channel to pipe to warehouse and then get written into our ERP correctly. But there's also functionality that's useful within Pipe itself. Order routing would be an example. So as we were looking for alternatives, you could look to something like Shopify, which has the option to pull in orders from other channels, aggregate them all within Shopify. But if you have a channel that has strict delivery SLAs or order quality SLAs, Shopify might not give you the granularity to say, if I'm going to this shipping address by this date, then go to this warehouse. Before we'd written and coded those rules, a change to those would be a long change management process. But Pipe sort of split the difference for us, where there's availability in those connectors, but also rules within the system itself that give us value.
Right. No, it makes sense. And obviously there's a lot of frustration. Sounds like missed opportunities, lost revenue, opportunity cost. Anthony, when clients were previously stuck in the cycle of, traditional 3PL without tools, it's quite difficult to integrate to. What were you hearing during these times?
Yeah, and that's a key focus for us. Is that was one of the biggest challenges for us. If we kind of think about our tech stack that we had developed for all these years, we built our own native integration. So that meant that we had to, when a client was onboarding to us, they would have to consume our APIs, which then meant that they would have development costs, time and resources. And that was a big, consideration when selecting us, because that also meant in a lot of cases, their contract with a previous 3PL, maybe their own lease was running out, and that they had limited time, maybe in some cases a week to weeks or so, or maybe a month. And then that became for us a friction point. And so when we started looking at, do we try to modernize? Do we try to start building our own connectors? We had built our own Shopify connectors. So for that ecosystem, that did help us accelerate it. But then you shift the focus out, and what's the next one that we should build? NetSuite, and then should we build a Salesforce Commerce Cloud? And then we get into the business of now not just being a 3PL, but an integration platform. And so when we looked out to the outside market, we started looking at some of the more complex iPasses that were out there. And while they had some of the pre-built connectors in there, it still didn't give us what we needed, which was removing the dependency on the tech resources and then putting that integration back in the hands of our operators and still simplifying things. We found Pipe17, and I would say at the beginning, looking at their library of all their commerce platforms connecting into the more common, systems that clients use that Dan had talked about, in addition to all the different sales channels, marketplaces, and B2B, because that's a big aspect of ours as well too. Not only do we need to connect to our clients' web store and their ERPs, we also need to be able to connect to their sales channels and B2B replenishment. And so as we started looking at that, Pipe17 became very attractive. Once we started looking at twofold, we needed to have plug and play where possible, no code, low code, where somebody like myself or an operator could go in and configure these integrations and workflows very quickly. That's where we found the biggest appeal from us. And so that removed a friction point from our clients. It made engaging with Radial easier. It made us, that's really where the speed of the onboarding came into play. And then as Dan had described, when anytime that we needed to change a workflow or that we needed to do something different, that in of itself became a project with time and cost. And then, Pipe17 allows us to, again, go into their user interface and just configure workflows and test very quickly. So in whole, that was the friction points that we had experienced, and Pipe17 fully unlocked all that for us and removed all that, again, tech dependency.
Yeah, I mean, removing tech dependency is definitely a common thing that I noticed between Dan and Anthony. And I also wanted to highlight a point that I think doesn't get covered as much is the omni-channel connectivity piece of it, because you're talking about B2B replenishment as a 3PL. All the inventory is there, and inventory has different requirements depending on what channel it's going to. And Radial has to manage all that complexity, but it also means that you need to connect to those different channels to send them notifications, ASNs, like whatever documents that are needed. And it seems like both of you have reviewed or been through this different process between like iPass, which has connectivity, like the toolkit for connectivity, but then it's almost like an exercise to the reader in a lot of cases, like, okay, now you need to do it yourself, in which case it just becomes a repository for those custom integrations. The OMS, which isn't really designed for the digital channels. And then finally, obviously, doing it yourself. So that, it just feels like something I wanted to bring home here. Does that resonate with, as you looked out in the market, Dan, like how did you see the options that were there?
No, I think that captures it well. It's tough to find a solution that has a library of connectors that is broad enough to enable expansion for us on both sides, so both to channels and to the logistics side, but also is both intuitive and detailed enough for our needs. So I think, like Anthony said, we were looking for something that was low or no code, but also wasn't a black box.
Right.
We wanted to be in a position where if something went wrong with an order, we could debug what that was, whether that was a channel or SKU mapping, or something connected to the wrong channel, an inventory message that an IT person could look at. And it was tough to find something that fit the bill for both cases. You either saw more complex systems that require a lot of self-serve development, or either like a more of a spaghetti tangled version of a low code where you're connecting all of these nodes pointing one thing to another, or something that is not granular enough for our details and business rules, where we need complex shipping mappings or complex schedules that we need to implement in terms of what warehouses are open at what time. So it's tough to find that Goldilocks solution.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would love to use this opportunity to bring in Ben to the conversation, because I think people approach you, Ben, as someone who can help find the right solution, compare and contrast options. Why do people come to you that are in this bucket, and how do you advise them about what the options of a solution like a Pipe17 and paired with a Shopify stack, obviously?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the evaluation sort of matrix is pretty broad. When we think about like the structure of the organization, the focus of the business on sales channels, on order routing, on some of the more traditional order management features and functionality, as well as just, as following what Dan and Anthony have been saying about just the willingness and the appetite for ongoing technical support, the ability to manage integrations, ongoing, all of these things play a role. And so I think what Pipe17 introduces, which is, becoming more and more commonplace, is the opportunity for customers of Pipe17, those that are considering the platform, to really think about systems integrators or the support system in general as more of a strategic advisor, domain expert, as opposed to somebody that understands how best to turn the wrenches. And so that really aligns well with, whether it is actual or aspirational, the points of view of most systems integrators. We all love to believe that we're great consultants. And, the closer we can get to solutions that have ready-made integrations that are business user-friendly, that have a lot of the starting points, for whether it is flows or the use of agents to, uncover issues or to execute on opportunities, then, it becomes mutually beneficial because, the client can really, again, focus on finding the right partner that understands, the domain and can help them really evolve their business towards generating more revenue and optimizing inventory, optimizing, fulfillment, as opposed to just finding another vendor that's ready-made to build.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, and I think you opened the door, Ben, to talk about AI a little bit, and in terms of how, I'll show one of the pages of the white paper, which talks about some of the elements of, that we reviewed, the costs and the benefits. We also introduced some sections about Pippin, which is the AI engine of Pipe17, in terms of how it lets you set up things more easily, diagnose problems, particularly by a non-technical user. I think that is something I want to dive into a little bit. Not only that itself, but its effect on the customer experience. Anthony, can you, I guess, help introduce? Because I think that story, from you as a user was pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I only have an hour here, 45 minutes left. I can go into the power of Pipe17's Pippin, and I use it daily. And so I think a couple of points to bring back is, Dan, you had talked about the black box. And so that was one of our biggest questions is, owning the technology and then giving that up to a third-party provider like Pipe17. We felt that we were going to be the recipient of the black box there. But the reality is that the way that Pipe17 is developed their platform, they give you access to events, they give you access to all the different processes and the events behind them. You can dig deeply into that. But then going back into the AI piece of that, there's two scenarios in which we use it commonly. One is the troubleshoot. So I can go look at their exception board. I can then say, all right, drill into this order. And it's got a brief description as to what the exception is. But then I can just prompt Pippin and say, can we go a little bit deeper? Can you help me understand why this occurred? Is it a mapping issue? And if it's a mapping issue, it can bring me to what the mapping is, explain how the mapping works. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I use that daily. So as a business user, I don't have to open up a ticket. I don't have to wait for our technical resources to get to it because, again, it might be lower priority in the grand schemes of things. It's not a big business impact, but I need to answer a question back to the client or to our team. So Pippin allows me to self-service real time. So that's a significant benefit for us. And it also allows our clients to be able to do the same. But then going into things about from a development perspective, there are certain things where a client will have a request. Their upstream system may not handle this very well. And so as an example, we had a client that needed to do a mystery gift with a combination of orders or combination of SKUs that fell in the order. And so they had an array of SKUs that could fall within that pattern. If the customer ordered a combination of SKU 1 and SKU 3, they would be eligible to get some gift that went along with that. The client system was unable to handle that well. And so they asked us if we could help that. So we prompted, Pippin to see what it could offer, and it was able to handle that complex scenario and without development code, typed in the prompts, and it came back with the coding to be able to do that. And so now we're able to evaluate an order. If it has those conditions, then we apply the free gift to the order and it flows downstream. And so that's just one example where Pippin, again, took us something that would have been development and allowed us to self-service and solve that within a few hours.
I mean, I think it's fascinating because not only you're talking about, we're all in the customer service business, and to be able to service the customer in that way, not only to have a better experience because they get a gift, but your customer is the merchant who now can do something that they couldn't even do on their own, that the platform allowed you to do, enabled by AI. I would love to hear a little bit about some of your use cases, Dan, for the agility that it unlocks. How are you using Pippin, maybe even the new MCP server that Pipe17 introduced?
Sure. And I think this has evolved even since we first talked for the white paper, which is that we went from a case where we had all of our Pipe17 expertise concentrated in, my IT team, who are very talented but have limited time. But I think the addition of it's those two use cases that Anthony mentioned. It's diagnostics, and then it's writing complex customizations that Pippin has unlocked for my business users, and has meant that not every request has to come through IT. So, for example, exception clearing out, diagnosing why something has happened, asking Pippin why that happened has been great. The other thing, if we have complex rules like a warehouse is struggling with Saturday deliveries when they ship FedEx, and we want to implement a rule that says, if an order comes in with a Saturday expected delivery and it is routed to this warehouse, only send in UPS. It's a complex bit of logic that would have taken us time to write out or code. It's something that Pippin one-shotted. Like you write the question and it got it right the first try. We go through our testing, which is built into Pipe, and we can run through test orders, verify that it has the right mapping coming out, and then deploy it. They've rolled out an MCP, which we started testing it as well, since we have our own MCPs connected to Claude, so that users can log in and say, give me the status of all my warehouses, or give me the status of late orders by warehouse so I can check performance. And it will give us answers at that level, like deeper level of analytical.
Got it.
That's useful. And would have
way better than any traditional analytics engine you might get otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's connected, and it's I think pretty well trained on their documentation and code base. We've gotten a lot of value out of it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I think this is a good time for us to flash the white paper, download again. If those are on the webinar, particularly those that have joined since the beginning, haven't downloaded the white paper, there's just a ton of information that we spent through. The webinar, the white paper itself, it's about 12, 13 pages, and it goes through just chapter and verse of the challenges with integration, really, and the difference between custom code and the various options available, and what is really your cost to serve that you can improve by having a tool like this powered by AI and Pippin. And so I think those things are definitely good for people to see. Would love to unpack a little bit the kind of the other side of it, Dan, as an operator, which is everything isn't perfect, and it's okay because products can improve. Where are the gaps? Are there gotchas in the day-to-day operating? Because I think if you're evaluating something, people come, to us in this forum for honesty at the end of the day, and retail is an echo chamber. No one expects everything to be perfect.
Yeah, I'll say there's a learning curve. I'd say initial setup took a few months, and then we invested the time and resources of technical folks on our team to make sure that things were well integrated. It was, a few persons full-time project for the few months of the integration, which meant we could dedicate the time to understanding it, handling all the edge cases, documenting everything. But I think once we had that knowledge in-house, it was easy for us to train and expand it to the rest of our business.
Yeah.
I'd say, Pipe's onboarding team, their solutions team was very good, like investing the time in training our people. So it took time. Took a little frustration at first, like you're learning anything new, but right. Once we got the hang of it, it added a lot of value for us.
No, it makes sense. And Anthony, I would love to hear this kind of the same thing from your side. What should people know? I mean, more than anything, it's like, what should you know going in to a project like this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think Dan, touched on it too. There's definitely a learning curve. The tool is intuitive, absolutely. As you start getting into the connectors piece of that, the ones like Shopify, the loop returns, the more common ones that you'll see, especially in the Shopify ecosystem, those are very straightforward. It became, when we started needing to connect to an ERP, as an example, like NetSuite, that while there is a pre-built connector, you have to also have experience within NetSuite to understand how to use the tool to be able to interact with NetSuite, and also how that client's specific implementation was there. Then the other side of that is when there's not a pre-built connector, Pipe17 has a network of open APIs, and so and the public documentation is very good. And then if we go back into us wanting to reduce the technical overhead, that then is also the consideration. If you don't have the technical resources to do that, I'm going to give Ben a plug here, but the reality is that's where his partnership and his familiarity with the ecosystem outside of Pipe17, but then also being an expert on the tool. If we do run into a situation in which, again, we're not familiar with the system that we need to connect into, or we just don't have the technical skill set available at that time, the platform is, again, extensive enough that we can partner with somebody like Ben to come in and do that for us. And I think those are like the big limitations, that not limitations, but those are the learning curves for us that we had to see up front. And then also having the technology, it has enough tools and it has enough features that we don't have to customize as much as we used to have to on our classic platform. The platform still allows you the ability to use, again, Pippin, and write some custom rules, but we're into more of a standard set of offerings than we are more of a custom set. And so I think for us, the learning curve is also with our clients that we're onboarding, is that the system can adapt to them, but we also need some mutual understanding that there's some adaptation both ways of the client, how they're going to be working with us and also within the tool. And so it minimizes our need to customize, but at the same time, when we need to customize, that's where we just have to figure out the right way to be able to do that without creating that customization that's hard to support.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time for us to bring in Ben again, because you just gave him a great plug, and I think we all know how great Ben has been in the industry and support for clients. This is a complex project, and a lot of people don't know how to evaluate, is this a problem that can be solved? What sort of solutions should I be looking at? So what questions should clients be asking as they come into a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about order management broadly, you've got a couple of core concepts. Like, first is the not so simple aspect of inventory awareness, right? So it's critical, especially when you've got multiple points of fulfillment. You've got, the order fulfillment. So are you routing orders in a special way? Do you need the flexibility to expand the points of fulfillment as the business grows? Are you thinking internationally, ship from store, all that kind of stuff? But oftentimes, some of the most important points of evaluation, which are trivialized or not even considered initially, are you mentioned customer service. So post-order processing, so the servicing of orders. The customer place an order with the wrong quantity or for the wrong size or whatever it is. And so ensuring that, you have the ability to go in and to modify that order, to catch it, to evaluate it, to put it in a holding tank, and then to take action on it. And then the second one is really just data more broadly. So when you think about all the data that's collected, both implicit and explicit in the storefront across a variety of sales channels, one of the core, just opportunities within a business of any size is normalizing that data across a variety of objects, so customers and orders and whatnot, and distributing it to all of the right places for analytical analysis, operational analysis, and then obviously to take action on. And so an order management system is one which plays a critical role in that effort. And so it has a nice, very not so secondary value in terms of bringing all of the data into a centralized place, and then being able to kind of move it along and or report on it directly out of the OMS.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's interesting because people need help evaluating these sorts of things and understanding the big shift it'll mean in your business. If somebody's in the audience, Dan, and thinking about, like, is this for me? How do you get over the hump from like, wow, it's going to take a lot of time, or it might not work, and then where we will be, like, how did you sort of personally get over it? And if you were putting yourself in someone else's shoes, what would you tell them?
I would think about time and opportunity cost. For us, I'd look at it in terms of, for the weeks we put in upfront to onboard with this tool, we've gotten back in dividends as weeks that it took us to launch on new channels. So if it took us a couple months to launch on Pipe17, and it used to take us a few months to launch on each channel, now it takes us days to launch on a channel. So if Pipe has a pre-built existing connector that I think Anthony used the good phrase, that has a standard workflow. So something like TikTok or Shein, which is built and you want to fulfill using, say, Amazon MCF, that's something we set up in a matter of days. And then we've onboarded a channel quickly. So I'd say if you're concerned about how long it's taking you to launch on anything, Pipe's a way that has allowed us to launch in a lot of places very quickly.
Got it. How about you, Anthony? Just in terms of what should people be asking themselves to make a decision in this kind of scenario?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at what you're doing today, as Dan had brought up, I mean, the time is certainly a big consideration, and that was a consideration for us too, because anytime we were helping a brand launch onto a new sales channel or do another B2B dropship fulfillment scenario, that was months, in some cases for us. And so I think the challenges that we face in a grander scale for multiple clients are the same challenges that an individual brand and merchant would face. And so again, you're on Shopify, so you may not need a full order management system, but that connectivity is there. And then also having a platform that can connect between all your individual systems. And as Ben had talked about, getting data out of the system. So, Pipe17 has Snowflake, and so you can get the data out of their system and get it into an analytical tool very easily. But it's the time, it's the cost. And as we were evaluating, just again, kind of use our scenario, and maybe it resonates with other folks, we were looking at, do we go out and find a different third-party order management system to replace our in-house version? And then what we found is that the options were out there, and that they came with a higher cost implementation time. It didn't gain us any economy of scale, being able to repeat things where, again, I can launch quickly on a channel. If I did it for one client and then having to do that same channel launch in the future, I didn't get that speed of use. And so Dan summed it up pretty well. It's the challenge there is if you're selling on multiple channels and you need to do that quickly, then looking at a platform like Pipe17, certainly is a good value that we identified. It's who we chose out of the plethora of all the different common order management systems and iPasses, which again you would have had to mash those together, which creates their own limitations. Whereas Pipe17 is the end-to-end, so the data flows and the schemas fit in naturally, and so we weren't getting another disjointed tech stack where again all that was simplified and easily connecting into a WMS. So, and
I'll add one more to that, Anthony, think of, which was, if you have a tech team or a business team that's concerned about losing complexity or losing extensibility, where they say, God, I have all these complex routing rules or all these complex mappings that we do to handle these channels. We do make use of Pipe17's open API to automate things that may not be on their UI. So their inventory module, their orders module, exceptions. We can, if something's not available in the tool, we can script something externally, call their API on a schedule. There's complexity like that we're able to build into it, even if it's not in the standard workflows that Pipe offers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's valuable, especially for a more complicated business, or you're worried you're going to lose something if the 80 to 90% is solved in the UI or through the AI scripting. At some point, you might hit a roadblock you don't expect.
Right. It's really a one size fits all, but there's enough Legos in the box that you can build things around it.
That's good. No, that's exciting. I mean, it's been a pleasure to share this journey with you guys. I'd like to remind everyone of the white paper, why we did it. Really, the title is The Modern Commerce Blueprint, how Pipe17 and Shopify, can essentially help accelerate you and unlock millions in trapped costs in the business. So we definitely heard that from Anthony and Dan today, with Ben supporting. So I'd like to thank them. Speed is another huge benefit that I took out of the conversation, because you're going to onboard in, a couple of months tops, but then every time you add a new channel is a big situation. Like any software, if you're not doing anything new, it's a different story. But we're in this world where everyone is forced to adopt new channels all the time, and the next channel that comes around, ChatGPT just launched its own purchase marketplace last week. And so we have no doubt that these things will keep coming. The kicker for me is all the AI transformation that Pippin offers, on top of kind of like Shopify solves the front end. Really, the thesis that we uncovered was that Pipe17 was really solving the back office, helping serve those orders for your customers more efficiently. So definitely appreciate everyone on the call today. If you haven't downloaded it, hit the link, take a picture of the QR code. We'll send a follow-up to everyone as part of the webinar. So thanks again for joining us today, and look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, guys.
Rick. Bye, guys.
Thank you.